Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Help Is Here podcast, brought to you by the Beyond Compulsion Academy. Today we have a little bit of a weird, different episode because I am introducing my mum to the podcast. So, hello and welcome, Mum. How are you doing?
Hello. Yes, it is a bit weird, me being here planning to talk to my son about porn. We've never done this before. I don't know how it's going to go.
Neither do I. Who knows? But yeah, like part of my mission right now in life is to try and make it normal to actually talk to family, friends, people in your life about this problem and help other people realise that actually you can fully go beyond this to the point where you've had this problem in the past and then you feel so comfortable because your brain's rewired that you feel open to talk about this problem with other people as well, even including your own mum, which may seem a bit weird at first. I never thought I'd do this, but we've ended up here. So the other second reason I want to talk to you about all this stuff today, and first of all, obviously we've not really spoke about the porn stuff before very much, so it's a little bit nervy for me as well. But the second thing is obviously you're a big inspiration to me in life. So I wonder if you want to start off by kind of sharing your own story of kind of having, obviously having cancer, getting diagnosed, and then how you've gone about dealing with that adversity to really make the most of life, because that's the inspiring part for me, is how even through this challenge, day by day, you're always looking at like, how do I actually make the most out of my life, which probably has led to me getting to where I'm at now with life, where I'm like trying to do the same basically. So yeah, do you want to kind of share a bit of that story?
Yeah, the thing is, I wish I'd not had to get cancer to value my life more. I suppose it's the same with anything. When it's limited, you value that time or that thing more. And I think most people don't ever think about dying or the prospect of dying. Think they're going to go. They know everyone's going to die sometime, but they never think it's going to happen until the dim and distant future. So 13 years ago now, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I remember it was really horrendous being diagnosed, and I remember it being terrible having to tell you and your sister, Tom, about it. But there's two kinds. Well, there's loads of kinds of breast cancer, but you can have primary breast cancer, and that was what I got diagnosed with 13 years ago. And I remember one of the best things my specialist nurse told me was nobody dies from early stage primary breast cancer. And so then all I had to worry about was all the treatment I'd have to face. And that made things seem a lot better. But you always have this worry it's going to come back and it's going to spread to other bits of your body. And unfortunately for me, 10 years ago, I did find out it had spread to other bits of my body. And at that point, they tell you it's treatable but not curable. And they won't really tell you anything else about him. When they first told me that it spread, I was like, well, how long does that mean I'm going to live? What's my prognosis? And they wouldn't tell you. And the reason why they don't tell you is it really varies from one person to another. So they don't know. But I was saying, well, do you mean I've got weeks to live? Do you mean I've got months to live? Have I got years to live? What? And they said, well, we just don't know. We can't tell. It depends on how you respond to treatment and everything. And so I looked it up on Google, as you do, because I wanted to have some sort of idea. And it said 3 years, and that was the average life expectancy. And that was 10 years ago now. And in fact, I celebrated my 10th anniversary of having secondary breast cancer last week. And it was such a milestone for me. And one of the main thing that has kept me going is love, basically, and love of my family primarily, and love of friends, and love of life. And I just appreciate my life so much more now and make the most of it all the time. I am lucky enough to go on holiday a lot, and that's the thing that really keeps me going, is looking forward to holidays. And it's not just the going on the holiday, it's the planning it, the looking forward to it, the being on it, and then the looking back. I always do a photo book afterwards. So that really helps. But just having friends and family and knowing that people care for you, and just little things you appreciate. Like, I wake up, apart from if I'm in pain, and apart from when I've just had my chemotherapy, So it's not all the time because I have chemotherapy every week. But when I'm not suffering from my pain or my chemotherapy, which is most of the time, I wake up just with a smile on my face. I really do, because I'm just so happy to still be here and to appreciate just things like having a bed to lie in and to have slept in, and having a house to live in. And things that you just take for granted, I don't take for granted anymore. And I wish I'd lived my life like I live it now, before my life was so limited. And the downside of my situation now, but I can try and make it into an upside, is that I never know how much longer I've got. I have scans every 3 months, and I live from one 3-month scan to the next to know whether the treatment's working or not. And that's not very nice, not being able to plan long term. But that just makes me live more in the moment and live day to day and appreciate every day more and appreciate the people around me more. So, yeah, I think I get a lot more out of life now, just making the most of every single minute rather than just taking it all for granted.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear that, because I think living in the moment is something that's kind of rare nowadays, and there won't be that many people who are that aware that, you know, death's this thing that's kind of impending. Like, it's kind of always there. And that's something that I've kind of been more aware of, I think, because of you. And obviously, I wish you didn't have to suffer so much for me to have learned that lesson since I was 12. But that's probably how I've become aware of it. And sometimes I do lose sight of that. But, like, since I was 12, I always had that fear of, like, shit, like, is my mum going to die soon, you know, which was kind of scary. But on the flip side too, that you can kind of transform that into the positive of, oh yeah, life is precious. Like, always having that thought of, you know, you could die at any moment. And then you've kind of passed that on to me in a way, which I know will have been incredibly challenging for you in many ways, but we can look for the sort of the positives to take from that in valuing life. And I think that's just something which I value so much. It's just, yeah, moment by moment, we're here right now. And so let's focus on what we're doing while we're alive instead of kind of way off into the future. Do you want to share a bit more about how you have managed to stay sort of grounded and actually cope with what's an incredibly traumatic thing to go through?
Well, I'm just so lucky to have my family. I mean, you've been great, Tom. I'm so proud of you, I really am, and the way you've dealt with it all. And I think if the people around me hadn't dealt with it all so well, I think I would have found it a lot harder if I'd been having to sort of like worry about you all the time and how you were coping. It would have been a lot worse for me. And it's really nice to know that, you know, I've helped you in a way through all this horrible stuff of me having cancer, for you to change or have a better outlook on life and appreciate it more, because you've seen me doing that. But it's easier to do that and have that outlook when you have got support from people and when you do have options to have a nice life. But I'm in this support group, and there's some people on that group that don't have much in their life at all, but even they now notice much more the little things in life that they really appreciate. So I don't recommend going and getting cancer. It's not fun, really.
No.
But it does, you know, change your outlook a lot. And I'm really proud that, you know, you're using your change in outlook to try and help other people. And I know you're really committed to trying to improve other people's lives as well. And
I think for me, like, one of the things with the porn in particular, one of the reasons why I wanted to stop doing it so much for so many years was when I was consuming it, one, I would feel horrendous afterwards, and two, feel like I'm wasting time. Three, it just felt like, oh my God, like, I'm living, like, I'm so goddamn lucky to be, like, healthy, well, got my life ahead of me, really. And then here I am, struggling mentally in this really low place. Meanwhile, you're having, like, chemo or whatever, and I'm struggling, doing something that I'm trying to stop over and over again, but keep on doing it. That's how it was for me when I was struggling with porn. And it's weird saying it to you now because I come in here on this podcast and I say this sort of stuff all the time and I'll talk about the past of it. But it's funny how I've not even had this conversation really with you before. You know, it's probably the first time you've even heard me say that.
Well, I knew only because you're doing this work to help other people now, and you found a way of putting it all behind you, and you've struggled for so long. You did all sorts of things, had read loads of self-help books, did everything you possibly could to stop yourself from getting into the spiral of watching porn all the time. And it's only now that you've found a way that helps you, really, really does help you, that you've talked about that. But I didn't know. I mean, I feel bad. Like, I couldn't believe it when you first told me that you used to be addicted to porn. I was like, well, when? I'm like, from 12? I mean, you were living in my house. Where was this happening? How was this happening? You know, and how did you keep this completely secret from me? And
it's so interesting. Can we go into that a bit? Because I feel like there's so many misconceptions around what it means to be addicted to porn. And maybe it's the language that needs to change first. And maybe what we're talking about really is like a compulsion, but the semantics don't matter too much. To me, it's like, do you have a behaviour in your life that you want to stop and you're unable to stop? That's where I was at with it. So before we get into my sort of definition of, you know, being addicted, which is probably what I just said there really, it's like there's this thing you want to do, but you keep on doing it and you're trying to stop it. But like from your perspective, maybe as a mother of someone who said, yeah, I've got this problem with porn, what does like porn addiction mean to you? Because I would also love to like clear up the misconceptions around this, because I think there's so many.
No, I would completely agree with porn. Any kind of addiction is something that you can't stop doing, even though you desperately want to stop.
Yeah.
That is what I would think an addiction is. I think if you just watch porn very, very rarely or occasionally, and you don't have a problem with it, and it doesn't impact on your life in any negative way, in my opinion, I don't think that's an issue, as long as it's not an issue for you or anybody else that you're with. But when it sort of makes you feel really bad, and when you feel like you've got a problem with it, and you want to solve that problem but you can't, that's my definition of a problem. Sorry, I didn't even know, though, that you were even watching porn at all. Never mind having a problem with it. I didn't know at all. How were you doing it? Where were you doing it? How did I not know this?
Where was I doing
And I don't know what I would have done if I'd known about it.
Yeah, but that's interesting because, like, so many people will grow up watching porn since they're, like, 12. And I suppose maybe their parents don't know that they're even watching it.
I've got a clue.
Really? You had no idea?
Well, you have to give your children some privacy, I think. You had your own bedroom. And, you know, I don't think it's right to keep snooping on your kids or anything. Maybe if I felt, you know, there was something untoward going on, I would have probably been more involved. But because you didn't even have, we deliberately didn't let you have a TV or a laptop in your room, so there must have been on
my phone.
On your phone.
Yeah.
But you just got a phone when you were 12, so is that about the first thing you used it for then?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I can't remember too well. I think I probably looked at a few sexual things probably on like the family laptop when I was younger, to be honest.
Oh dear.
I know, exactly.
That's nothing to do with me.
No. But yeah, I think they're like, the thing is, people wouldn't even know what to do. Like, even if you knew that I was struggling with that problem, I don't think there's anything you could have said or done to help me with that problem.
Well, it probably might have made it worse from turning, you know, we might have got into some sort of conflict which would make you feel worse.
Yeah.
And make you turn to it even more. One thing I worry about with all of this is the time when you said that you started watching it was the time when I got diagnosed with breast cancer. Did that have anything to do with it?
It's a good question. I used to think it was the number one thing to do with it. And it may have been when I was younger. So like when I was in my teenage years, maybe I was trying to escape some discomfort, turn to porn. But what I've come to understand through Mary is once those neural pathways are wired, they're wired. So it doesn't really matter what the reason is that you start choosing to watch that content. Once those neural pathways have developed, you're going to want to do it. Like, you're going to continue wanting to do it and wanting to do it and wanting to do it. So even if it was to do with the cancer or whether it wasn't, to overcome the problem, I didn't need to go figure out any stuff to do with the cancer. So I don't know if you know this, but I went to therapy a few years back, and I only went for like 2 sessions. If I'm honest, I thought it was rubbish. It was really bad. But I went for like 2 sessions, and in one of the sessions, I was telling the guy about the therapist about this problem with porn, and I was saying how awful it makes me feel, and I can't stop doing it. And he starts delving deep into family stuff. So he brings up like the cancer stuff, and he's like, do you think it's to do with your mum, blah, blah, blah. And is it to do with like escaping some pain, to do with that, and some fear and anxiety and all of this sort of stuff. I go home, I watch more porn, and I felt absolutely terrible. Like, after the therapy session, I go home, watch more porn. So what I believe people are doing is they're trying to treat the reason, the cause that someone developed the addictive neural pathways, which may have happened when they were like 12, for example. But that's the wrong way of doing things, because to actually change those neural pathways, we need to think through the choice every time you have the urge, because the brain's now wired, so you're going to want it no matter what, basically. So now it's about, okay, how do we change that neural pathway by getting into that wanting, thinking through that choice repeatedly to redirect the neural pathway. And it's not really to do with the reason. So basically, to solve the problem, it had nothing to do with your cancer, basically. And all those self-improvement books I read, they didn't really help me. Maybe they helped me deal with some other stuff a little bit, but in terms of actually overcoming porn, nothing to do with it, because I was still watching porn, I was still relapsing when I was in therapy, still relapsing when I was reading all the self-improvement. It was only when I started to learn how to deal with the desire correctly that I actually changed my brain and got here. So yeah.
I was just laughing a little bit to myself, because I was just thinking as you were talking about, you always laugh at me because I say like little sayings about things that half the time you don't understand what I'm on about. So I was just thinking, that's like locking the stable door after the horse is bolted. And I was just thinking, that's a typical thing I always say.
That's so similar though to what Mary always says. Mary always says like therapy and like self-improvement and things like that is the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
It's like it's doing it the wrong way around.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that what you're saying as well?
Well, sort of. I'm saying that if I've understood you correctly, like if you're all talking about the past and trying to sort with a therapist, trying to sort out all issues to do with your past as a means of solving your future, that wouldn't necessarily work, because it's all to do with your neural pathways. And so your neural pathways have been screwed up basically already.
Yeah.
And so just sort of focusing on what happened before they were screwed up isn't actually going to sort those neural pathways out.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is locking the stable door after the horse is bolted.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It is. There's a lot of horses in these analogies in there.
Yeah, plodding along.
But that makes me think of like with your cancer, because there's kind of like similarities here in that, you know, you've obviously dealt with your cancer like incredibly well, like just unbelievably well, and so inspiring to me.
Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you for your kind words about being proud of me earlier. We could stop complimenting each other or get a bit too...
Yeah, get the sick bucket out.
Get a bit too sickly, yeah, exactly. But no, what I was going to say is, like, if you were to then go to, like, I know you've had, like, a bit of coaching and stuff, right? But if you were to just be in therapy all the time, like, trying to figure out, like, why did I get my cancer? And, like, obviously, it may have been to do with, like, work stress and stuff. But it's like, would that have been that useful? Or would going out, seeing your friends, travelling, having a fun time, and just being more in the present moment be more useful in terms of changing those neural pathways?
Well, that's why I think coaching, if my understanding is correct, that's why I think coaching is better than counselling. And I've had both, because counselling tends to talk about the past and how you feel. And in a way, it's useful for you to be able to get everything off your chest. But then the problem is, if you've got a counsellor or a therapist, you've got a set appointment time, and you might have that appointment at a time when you're feeling absolutely fine. What you really need is someone to talk to like that when you're feeling really down, not at an appointment time when you might as well be going and enjoying yourself and not thinking about all your problems. Yeah. But coaching, when I've had that, it does help me think, well, what can I do practically to help myself with these issues? And there's a lot about what you can control and what you can't control, and how you can improve the areas of your life that you can control. And I think both the counselling and the coaching has helped me think, right, what's most important in my life? And I've concluded that the most important thing in my life is my family, particularly my close family, and my friends, and then enjoyment of life, which is the holidays. And just realising that, not thinking. And the other thing that I think I've come to terms with, but it has helped just having this longevity compared with what I thought I was going to have once I've got my diagnosis, is just not dwelling all the time on what I'm missing out on in the future. Like, that's taken a lot of work too, and I sometimes get down with that now, like, you know, and being jealous of people who haven't got terminal cancer, who are just planning their lives, you know, my peers who might be sort of planning what they're going to do in their retirement or having grandchildren or things like that, and I'm going to miss out on all of that. And I can't help but getting a bit sad about that at times. But I try and focus on the here and now, and just make the most out of the time I've got, knowing full well that, you know, it could stop any minute, really. That's the main thing, rather than thinking about what I won't be able to do in the future. And I've probably, in this 10 years, packed more into my life than I would have done if I'd lived for a further 40 years.
Yeah. And how do you feel now about sort of like...
I've got a little tear here, but that's not because I'm crying because I'm upset, but I've got, the chemo gives me really dry eyes, so my eyes keep watering all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't blame you if you were crying, but yeah, it is from the chemo, so... Yeah. And how do you, like, feel about sort of life and death now, at this point, having had the cancer and having this sort of, this idea that, you know, your life couldn't be around, like you may not be around for that much longer in the future, like kind of been probably in your mind for like 10 years, but you don't seem to focus on that much?
No.
Or do you not focus on that because, like, with me and you, like, you don't want to, like, worry me and stuff?
Yeah, I probably don't talk to many people much about that, and I think that's probably where my support group comes in and where therapy does come in, either coaching or counselling, because you don't want to get other people upset that are close to you. But I have got I find it a lot easier thinking about those things now, but that is because I feel like the last 10 years have always been bonus years rather than, you know, because when I first got diagnosed, I talk about 10 years rather than the 13 years I've had cancer, because I never thought I was going to die from the primary cancer, so I just had to get through the treatment. But there's 10 years when I've constantly had this idea that I could die any time on my mind. At first, it's awful, and I don't think you really noticed it quite so much, but I got my secondary diagnosis a couple of weeks before Mother's Day, so it's the same time as now.
Well, I remember that Mother's Day when
and
I upset you, and you was like tears like flooding. You know, you was so upset that day, and I don't think I was helping much. I mean, this is like 10 years ago, so I was pretty young. I was like in my teens, right? But I remember I was probably taking it a bit for granted at that point that you were going to be around. I didn't believe, you're going to die soon. But I mean,
I don't think me or John, your dad, had. I don't know how much you knew about it either. We didn't want to go.
I probably didn't.
We didn't want to go saying to you, "Oh, there's a chance your mum might not live a whole other year," because, as I say, the average is 3 years, but that means it could be a year or less. They just don't tell you. And so I think Mother's Day is important to me. Remember, Sunday. And, you know, it was only 2 weeks after my diagnosis. It was Mother's Day, and we'd already previously all arranged to meet up as a big family for it. And I just remember spending most of the time in the pub toilets just crying because I just thought this is going to be my last Mother's Day. And it does get me upset, actually, because you and Katie are the most... I want to be there for you as a mum. And, I was thinking then, and it is true now, but I've got more used to it now, that, I thought then, as you say, you were only a teenager then. I wanted to be able to see you grow up. I wanted to have grandchildren. I wanted to, see that you become a good man and, were happy in your life and everything. And I didn't know whether that was going to actually happen, whether I would ever see any of that. And I am really grateful now that I've had 10 years to see you grow up and to see you, do all these good things you do with the porn stuff and how you...
That sounds so weird, by the way.
I know, you're not doing good, you'd be making a hell of a lot more money than you are now if you were doing good stuff with porn, but I'd rather you weren't doing that. And I think it's really good what you're doing now. Just, and I'm really pleased that, I think when you think you're going to die as well, it makes you think about not only what's important to you in terms of what you like and love, but what your values are as well. And I feel quite proud, and I hope it is to do with me, that I've brought you up to be kind and caring and respectful, and want to help other people. And that's what you're doing with this business, to try and help other people get rid of their addictions, particularly to porn, because you've found a way, and you're working with Mary, who, is very, very, very experienced in all of this. So, yeah, hopefully you've learnt those good values as well.
Oh, Mum, I want to give you a hug.
I know, but it is really upsetting. I'm happy now to have lived as long as I have done, and hopefully it'll be even longer. But the thing that upsets me most is not being there for you and Katie, more so than for John, the husband. So Katie's my daughter and John's my husband, and my mum and dad. But as mum, the people you care about most and that you want to be there for most are your kids. You're my child, so that's... Sorry, I'm crying now, but that's the only thing that upsets me, is not being there for you in the future. But at least you won't have to look after me in my old age.
Well, you're here now, though, and that's the thing, is we just don't know. I
know, and I keep thinking, God, I feel like I've made a fool of myself over the years, because every year it's been like, oh, this is my last Mother's Day, this is my last birthday, this is my last Christmas.
Yeah.
And I feel like the little boy who cried wolf. No one's going to believe me anymore that, I've got anything wrong with me. And because I've gone on for so long, and I do seem so well, and, well, I am generally well, it's fine. So nowadays, I don't really talk about it like that, because I feel embarrassed that I've been doing that for so long and I'm still here. And you still got to put up with me.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible, though, how well you do
God,
seem.
I can't believe you've made me cry, Tom. Made myself cry.
I'm sorry, Mum. I'm sorry. I feel bad. I didn't want you to end up in tears.
I know. I didn't think I would do. What an idiot.
And I feel bad because we've got the mic in between us. I can't just give you a proper hug, which I want to do.
That
but
afterwards.
We'll do it afterwards, yeah. But no, I mean, in terms of being there for me and Katie, I don't think we could have been more inspired growing up. I don't think you could do anything more than you have already. And I'm happy with the person I've become. I'm sure Katie's happy with who she is. And anyway, you're still here at the end of the day. And it's like bringing it back to the present moment. It's like just being grateful that you're here right now. That's all that matters, because that's all we have is this moment here,
And I think it has brought us all closer together as well, actually. I mean, not that we've always been close, but I do feel more close now. And again, it's back to this valuing things, and, you think, well, just not to make the most of the time we've got together. Yeah.
Do you have any sort of advice for people on how to, I mean, maybe this isn't even the best person to ask in a way, because when you're in the addiction, I think one of the problems is even the little things in life, that they're not that enjoyable. Do you remember in Portugal one time a few years ago when I actually upset you and you were in tears? That's in what I call a remember letter now. Can you remember that?
I remember you upsetting me, but I can't even remember what it was about now.
No, I can't remember either.
I remember you really annoying me and me getting really upset. but I have no idea why.
Yeah. No, I remember what it was. It was in Monchique in Portugal.
Yeah, I remember where it was.
Yeah.
I have no idea what it was about, though.
Well, you were like,
Oh, don't bring it back up again now. You might upset me all over again.
I'm not putting the blame on you. I'll take some responsibility this time, right? No, what happened was, like, I remember you was like, I don't know, I think you was shouting at grandma or something, like waving to them. No, like, I'm not blaming you, I
shouting
promise.
to them.
Yeah, shouting to them. But I was, in my head, I was like, oh my God, like, you making such a scene or something. Because I was like feeling embarrassed, but hear me out, okay? Right, back then, I would say I was definitely struggling with the addiction. And that's why I was being such a dick about it. Not to just take no responsibility. Like, I was being a dick about it, and that's on me, right? But when you're in the addiction and you're trying to manage and control it, and you've got these desires, it's like they're always there in your brain. And it's like you think about it quite a lot, even if you're not completely aware that you're thinking about it. There's this like agitation, frustration, like you want to get out of these feelings. And so I think on that day, I was just being a bit of a dick because I was just irritated, to be honest, because I was using what we call like willpower. It's like there's this thing you want to do, you feel like you can't do it, and you end up using willpower. So it's like you got this resistance. So as I say, I take full responsibility. There's no excuse there at all. But I would say I wouldn't have been such a dick then if it wasn't for the fact I was in the addiction, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah. Well, that's no excuse, but...
No, I know.
I remember it now. Now you've brought it up again.
Yeah,
I remember what that was all about. Yes, and I remember feeling really fed up with you for a couple of days. And we did have... I think that was the biggest argument we've ever had, actually, wasn't it? And I didn't know that's what was going on in your head, though. Because at that point, you hadn't started doing any of this work,
Mary,
had you?
No.
And so I didn't know what was going on in your head at all.
But it's so hard to talk about it. Like when you're in it, it's like you don't want to tell your family or friends about it because you can't see a way out. And you think you're probably going to be in that like forever, just like managing, controlling it. So that's what I was doing, is I was like doing streaks. So like at that point in Portugal, I'd probably gone like a month, 2 months, whatever, without even looking at porn. So it's not like I was doing it all the time. And even growing up, I wasn't doing it like all the time. Like addiction, what we teach is more about, okay, how do you have freedom of choice? Like, how do you feel in control of yourself? How do you have this peace of mind where you feel like you completely trust yourself and you've not got this irritation, this frustration, this agitation always sort of going around in your head? But at that point, I was still managing, controlling the addiction. So I had all this annoyance within me, and I probably took that out on you. But back then, because I had no idea of how to actually get out of that place, I didn't really feel like I can just say, oh yeah, Mum, sorry for being a dick, I just really wanted to look at porn. Like, it would sound so weird, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it would have been a bit shocking as well, but I would have rather you'd said that, but yeah.
But there can be shame around it as well, like...
I know, it's just... I remember when you first started doing this work.
How did that even come about? Like, I can't remember
telling
you.
You told me that you were doing this coaching in addiction, and you told your dad earlier about it being to do with addiction to porn, but you hadn't told me it was to do with addiction to porn.
I can't even remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so it was Dad that told me it was about porn,
right.
Not you. And then I didn't know whether to admit to you that I knew that.
Right. What was your response when you found out that was...
Only what I've said earlier is like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Not particularly judgmental in a way, but more surprised that, well, how did you go about doing that?
Right. Well, the practical side of it.
How did you keep that so secret?
Yeah.
But I mean, I wasn't proud of you for being, looking at, and especially at age 12 and everything. I'm probably very naive about it all. I mean, I know in my day, 12-year-old boys were looking at porn, but it was just like page 3 of the newspaper. It didn't go any further than that particularly, or top shelf magazines.
Yeah.
But I know boys at that age are all interested in that sort of thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
And now it's just so much more accessible.
Yeah.
I can't understand, though. Are there not any restrictions? And how do you actually... Can you just say... Do they not sort of force you to proof of age or anything like that?
No, I don't know what it's like nowadays, to be honest with you. I've not actually been on a porn site for a long time, years and years really. But what I was doing was I was using social media up until like meeting Mary and doing the programme. I was using social media to consume sexual content, so like things like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. You can access X as well, like Twitter. Like, oh my god, like you can see porn, basically porn, on those sites as well. So even if you've got it completely restricted on, let's say, like a main porn site like Pornhub, even if they did have like these age verification, etc., there's no way anyone's ever going to be deprived of porn. There'll always be a way to access it, even if you're 12 years old. So,
were you spending any money on it?
No, I've never spent money on it. No. But the mental energy of it, and I was definitely, I mean, between like age 12 and like 16, I was looking at it probably every night, to be honest, like before I went to sleep. But
Right.
my excuse, in our program, we talk about junkie thoughts. It's like excuses, rationalizations, justifications to do this thing. Back then, I was doing it every night pretty much. I was in the addiction. I had no idea that was even a problem, though. I literally didn't know I was in addiction. I didn't know it was a problem. Just knew nothing about it from like 12 to 16. Every night, my thought pattern, what I would call a junkie thought now, was, I'm cold, I need to do this to get to sleep. Because growing up, you gotta admit, like, my room was never very warm. Like, I don't want to hate on our house too much.
No, it's a very cold room, that.
It was a cold room, wasn't it? So my thought was always, I need to do this to warm up in my bed.
Right.
Which is pretty insane looking back. But yeah, that's what I was doing. And then I discovered I had a problem around age 16. And then I'd reduce my frequency to these no-fap streaks. Have I ever told you about no-fap?
Yeah, you've told me about that.
Yeah, so I'd start to do that. And then I was just intermittently reinforcing the addictive neural pathways. But yeah, usually in my room, sort of on my phone. And yeah, it's insane that anyone can access porn at any time. And so what I believe is we need to start by providing the right education to people so they can change their brain and their perception on it, rather than focus on the external, like using blockers or restrictions or anything like that, because there'll always be a way around it. Like once your brain's wired to want it, it'll just go on a mission, a one-way mission to try find it one way or another.
But do you think what I'm getting at, though, is to stop you getting into that bad neural pathway in the first place? You know, at a very vulnerable time in your life at age 12, like surely there could be more done to stop children accessing it and creating a problem for themselves in the first place.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was probably even worse then. It may be getting better now in terms of the awareness around it. I'm not entirely sure. But I would say as well, like, yeah, with the social media, I think kids are allowed on social media, right? Like under 18s, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even if they're on social media, they're accessing it.
Yeah.
Or some kind of sexual content. But even things that aren't even porn would kind of get me excited in my brain, like music videos and stuff. Like there's so many things which you could look at and be like turned on by. Anything on a screen, really.
So, you know, you were saying that you sort of didn't really think you had a problem with it until you were at 16, but you'd been looking at it daily up until then.
Yeah.
What made you think you had a problem with it?
Yeah, this is such a wild one to share with you, as you're my mum.
Oh, okay.
I will say it though, because again, like I want to show to people that you can have these open, honest conversations, like once you're beyond it, and even maybe when you're in it, but that may be harder. But yeah, talking about things being harder, my problem was when I was 16, I got erectile dysfunction basically. For the first time, trying to have sex.
I can't believe we're having this conversation.
Exactly. You can see why I was a bit like, oh God, it's like, you've asked me this, now I'm really in it, aren't I? Bloody hell.
You started it.
Shrivel happens, yeah. We did the podcast like a few months ago, and Andy's in the studio, and I was talking about erectile dysfunction, and I was just talking about shrivel. I was so bad. Why am I having this conversation with my mum? Gonna lose so many followers on the podcast now. They're gonna be like, why are you talking to your mum about this stuff?
But I think it is true that it just shows how far you've come, so to speak.
Oh my God, don't even go there. Oh, shit. Nah.
That you can have this conversation now.
I can't. Yeah. Why did you have to use that phrasing though? There's no need.
Not to say that.
There's no need for that. It's already hard enough.
But that wasn't the problem then.
Oh dear. But yeah, that's what happened when I was like 16. And then I went online and I went on YouTube and I was like, what the hell just happened here? And then I found out about this thing called NoFap. And NoFap was just like all these sort of just people. It was mostly people sort of full of enthusiasm, excitement, talking about overcoming porn addiction. Via this NoFap thing, where it's like you have all this like motivation and excitement. It's almost like another self-improvement tool. But yeah, that didn't get me anywhere. Like it just led to me going around in circles. So I'd do these streaks for weeks, months, and then I'd always end up going back to it, relapsing as I'd call it, feeling awful again. Then like, oh yeah, let's start again, new NoFap streak. And it is interesting because it was in my head a lot. Like this problem would be on my mind so much. But yeah, growing up, and throughout so many years, just never really mentioned it to you or dad because it's kind of like this secret part of me. Whereas now I feel like I can actually like integrate all my parts and I've got nothing to sort of hide anymore, which is quite nice on the other side of it. So yeah, it was hard.
Or not, as the case may be.
Or not, yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And how the fact that you don't have a problem with porn anymore, how has that enhanced your life?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say the main thing is self-trust, and peace of mind. You know, feeling like you can talk about this sort of thing really with anyone, and there's no fear in the back of my mind, like, oh God, like, I've been talking about it loads, and I'm gonna have all this desire, and I'm gonna go home and like get out of control or something. It's like, no, I'm good now.
Has it affected your love life badly in the past and positively now?
Yeah, I'd say in the past, I probably modelled what I saw in porn in relationships and would objectify women more than I would like. Whereas now, my relationship's a lot more built on characteristics and qualities like trust and respect and loyalty and honesty and intellectual things like, you know, playing the games on the New York Times, you know, like playing Wordle and shit like that, rather than just like thinking about sex and stuff. Yeah.
Going back to that time when we had that bust up in Portugal, I remember now, one of the things that really upset me is that you really talked down to me. And sort of I remember thinking, and I had no idea this porn stuff was going on in your head. But I remember, I think the thing that upset me most was I can't remember exactly what it was you said or something, but you made me feel really disrespected as a woman. And I can't remember the detail at all, but that was the thing that upset me most. And maybe you were like that because of the other things going on in your head that I wasn't aware of at the time.
Maybe. And I remember in my last relationship when, I don't want to say her name on here, just because of like anonymity, but remember in my last relationship when she came around to ours like over Christmas and you said to me like, you're not respecting her enough. Can you remember that a few years ago?
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing. Because I was still in the addiction then. I was like managing it at that point, like sort of doing the streaks like maybe once every few months or whatever. I definitely wasn't in a good way overall then. And that was one of the reasons I ended that relationship as well. You might not know about that, but I was like, at this point in my life, I probably am not ready for a relationship. Like I need to just get this problem sorted and then maybe go into a relationship in the future. Because I just knew I was not in the best place mentally and I had to prioritise sorting this stuff out.
Yeah, you seem in a much better place now in your relationship, your different relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting any inkling of any of that disrespect that I sometimes seeped out of you before, that I was often sort of quite conscious of and didn't like about you at that time.
Because I'd be like, the worst thing is like having your own mum think you're like a misogynist. You know, I just hate that.
I think I said that in our argument actually, wasn't I?
Well, you call me misogynistic, did you? Yeah, I think you did.
Possibly did at that point in time.
But again, I take full responsibility. I don't want to just be like, oh yeah, it was because of porn. It's like, porn probably had a part to play. And that's an interesting point, to be fair, is I do believe like most people like the way they think about things is kind of based on the stuff that they've consumed and the material that they've seen, and all their experiences just sort of accumulate together. You know, it's almost like this big socially constructed thing. And so, yeah, if we want as a society to kind of live in a less misogynistic world, I think porn and overcoming this problem does play a bit of a part. It's not what I'm in this for entirely. Like, obviously, it plays a part. Like, obviously, you've got strong beliefs about, you know, the value of women being the same as the value as men, and I would agree with that wholeheartedly, of course. But, you know, I think the whole thing with the porn issue, in terms of society, it probably does play a part in terms of, you know, things like rape, for example, and sexual assault. There's so many reasons to choose to overcome this problem, which is societal as well as just like internally for your own mind. But I tend to focus on how's it affecting men, you know, because I think that's the thing that people miss out in society. Is there's so many BBC articles on the sort of misogynistic side of porn, but very rarely as a society do we go, okay, well, these guys looked at this stuff when they were 12. They got these addictive neural pathways. They got born in this society with no access to information on how to overcome this problem. How do we help them, you know? Like, that's what's so important to me. And I think it's being overlooked, to be honest. I don't think there's many people who are looking at it like, shit, let's actually kind of understand the guy's side of things as well. Because it is hard. It's hard or it's not hard, but, you know, it's challenging.
You can say the word hard now.
I know. But it's challenging being in a porn addiction. It's the most difficult thing I've experienced in my life, by a long way. It was just horrible.
And it's awful that people can't, when they're in that experience, and you're saying how horrendous that was for you, and it must affect so many men.
Yeah.
And to not feel like you've got anyone to talk to about it.
Yeah.
I mean, generally we're very close, but, you know, this was all new to me up until recently.
Yeah.
And you've told me things that I didn't know today as well.
Yeah.
And that must be the same for everybody.
Yeah.
And it must be really, really difficult for men to reach out and get help as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. But
because
help is on hand.
Help is here. That's the name of the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, help is here. Yeah, that's the thing is, you know, if you've got family around you or even like your partner, because of the shame side of things and this fear that you're going to do it again in the future, it can be hard to just be open and honest about it. And we talk about these different parts of the mind, like the rational mind, the child self, the addicted part of the mind. And in a way, it's like when the addicted part of the mind is getting you to do things you don't want to do, you feel such a lack of self-trust that even saying to someone, okay, I've got this problem, I'm going to try really hard to overcome it, I'm going to go beyond this. Unless you've been trained specifically on how to actually do that, chances are you're going to say that and then you may go a period of time without doing it, and then you're going to like break that promise, and then you're going to feel absolutely terrible about yourself anyway. Because as we always teach, compulsive desire, like once these neural pathways are in place, it refuses to be ignored. It's going to stick around until you've changed those neural pathways. And the way I see the whole porn thing is it's more like a drug, like heroin or anything like that, rather than this big sexual thing. It's actually a lot less about the sexuality side of things and more to do with the brain and getting wired to something that's incredibly addictive.
Addiction.
It's just addiction. Yeah, it's just addiction.
Yeah.
You imagine a 12-year-old. Imagine me as a 12-year-old
Yeah.
being given heroin and then not told that it's got any consequences, and then taking heroin every day for 4 years.
Yeah.
It's scary, isn't it? It's crazy.
Yeah.
So insane.
And
But,
not feeling like there's anywhere you can go to get help with it either. You can't even talk to your parents about it.
Yeah.
And it's easier to keep secret as well.
Yeah. It's insane, actually, this conversation, because it never really made me think, like, shit, I was actually young, like, getting exposed to this. I feel a bit sorry for, like, my younger self now. But until this conversation, I hadn't really seen it quite as much like that. I think I had thought about it in that way a few times, but I really feel that right now. I'm like, oh my God, like, I feel sorry for my younger self in a way. And also other guys out there going through this as well.
Well, that was my first reaction when I found out that you'd been looking at porn from the age of 12. I felt a bit responsible as a mum, you know, that how how did I not know about it? But just like, why wasn't I able to help you with that? You know, something that obviously caused you a lot of emotional distress. And that's what I was getting upset about earlier with my cancer, was like, as a mum, and I don't think you really realise this until you're a parent yourself, how much you feel the need to look after and protect your children, whatever the age they are. Even now I feel like that with you. And but particularly when they're younger. So to know now that there was something going on in your life that was affecting you so badly that I was absolutely clueless about, you know, I can't help feeling a bit guilty about that myself.
Yeah, but I just don't think, even if you knew there was a problem going on, I can't think of anything you could have done to make it better. I really don't, because maybe initial instinct could be, okay, let's help you by putting some blockers in place. So we block up the Wi-Fi so you can't access any porn sites, right? Because that's what some parents will do. That's probably the most common thing that parents will do. If their kids are struggling with porn, they'll go, okay, well, we can block all the porn sites. What that would have led to are these feelings of deprivation. Whereas there's this thing I want because my brain's wired to want it at that point, and I feel like I can't have it. So then it would have actually led to even more irritation, frustration, annoyance.
And that's the different approach that your program takes, isn't it? That it's all about
choice,
not having things that you can't do, but just having alternatives maybe, and changing the way you think about things so that you know, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of your program, but isn't it, from what you've said, isn't it about nothing is forcing you not to do it? You always have that choice, and you're not getting deprived of things. But think of the things you could be doing instead, and the way you could look at things differently. So you're choosing not to do it rather than forcing yourself not to do it.
Well, and even the language there, I'd probably say could be shifted to make it way more beneficial. And this is the thing, is the language is just so powerful, as you know. But you know, this first of all, alternatives, not really. It's more about just focusing on the change in language and experiencing the discomfort. And then, so we don't really even talk about alternatives much, to be honest, which I did in the past. So that's why you might maybe talking about that, because, you know, in the past I used to always say, like, focus on what you do want instead of what you don't want, because I'd read Atomic Habits, for example, by James Clear, where he's always talking about, like, to break a habit, you got to make a habit. So a few years ago, when I first probably told you about some of the work I do, I was probably using a different approach, which wasn't really working anyway, because I'll still relapsing. But yeah, definitely about the choice and thinking about things in a different way, so you can see, actually, every moment, every day I've got a choice. And the interesting thing you said there, which will really help people listening, is you talked about not doing something, whereas how I'd phrase it is, you're always choosing to do something. It's impossible to not do something. Because how can you not look at porn? That's not an actual action that you take. You can save that for when you're dead, like when you're in a grave, because most people in a grave are on a longer period of time streak of abstinence, of choosing to not watch porn, than anyone alive, you know, like who's in an addiction. So not doing, do you know what I mean? Like,
don't really get you there.
So someone who's dead is on a longer no-fap streak than someone who's alive in a porn addiction. Because they're going amount of days without watching porn. Whereas the way I teach things is, to actually overcome this problem, we've got neural pathways that need to be proactively changed as we're alive.
Right.
Does that make sense? Because we're always doing something. It's impossible to not do something. Not doing something doesn't exist.
Yeah. I think I get you.
It is semantics. I know it's weird. It's a different way of looking at things, and maybe I've not explained it very well, but does that kind of make sense a little bit, you see?
I think I know what you're talking about.
You got any questions on it at all?
Yeah. I think I know. We're getting a bit philosophical here, I think.
Maybe it's just the language. What am I choosing to do and why? That's the question.
Yeah.
Alright. Should we wrap it up there? Otherwise I'm going to end up talking about the programme forever and get all passionate and on a spiel and start monologuing about random stuff that makes no sense, really.
But it's been fascinating talking to you about this, Tom. I've learned a few things.
God, yeah.
It's been lovely, actually.
All right, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Mum. It's been interesting, a bit weird, but fun, sort of sharing some of this stuff with you. But yeah, I can't say how grateful I am for you, obviously, and I don't think I'd be here comfortable talking about this stuff and sort of going through it in life if it weren't for the determination to live a good life that's trickled down from everything that you've done in your life, and also helping other people as well, because we've not even spoke about like really some of the amazing stuff you've done, like the charity that you set up, Cancer Treat Club to help other people, and many other charitable things that you've done over the years, like with the refugees and other stuff as well. So yeah, thank you for inspiring me. I appreciate you, and I love you lots. All right, and thanks to anyone listening. Hopefully you can see what's possible for you as well, if you overcome this problem, which is 100% possible. Permanent mental freedom is possible. We're here to help as well, and yeah, if you want to get in touch, or if you want any more information on the Beyond Compulsion method, I do send out emails pretty much every day, really. So I'll leave a link in the description to the email list, and hopefully those emails can help as well. So yeah, cheers again, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.